Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhare. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhare. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhare. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhare. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhare. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhare. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnu Pad, Paramahamsa Paripurikacharya, Stotra Shata Sri Srima, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Sama Veda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Good morning. Welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. Reading from 10th Canto, chapter 74, verse 30. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudidayat Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangulam Gayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gunundinatarinam Aramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Isharam Om Ajnanatamrandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhagavad Swami. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pasya Tadeshatari. Itam nishamya damagoshuta swapitad utaya krishna gunavarna jata manu utkishpya bahum idam aha sadashi amarshi samshravaryan bhagavate harushanya abhita itam nishamya damagosh Itam nishamya damagoshita swapitad. Utaya Krishna Guna Varnana Jata Mana Manyuhu. Utkishya Utkishpya Bahum Idam Aha Sadashi Amarshi. Samshavayan Bhagavate Parushani Abhitaha. Itan Nishamya Damagoshtuta Swapitad. Itaya Krishna Gunavarna Jata Manyuhu. Utkishpya Bahum Idam Aha Sadashi Amarshi. Samshavayan Bhagavate Purushani Abhitaha. That's a doozy. Please chant. Itam thus. Nishamya hearing. Damagosh Sutaha, the son of Damagosh, Shishupal. Swa his. Pitahat from the seat. Utaya rising. Krishna Guna of the great qualities of Lord Krishna. Varnana, by the descriptions. Jata, aroused. Manyuhu, whose anger. Ukshipya, waving. Bahum, his arms. Idam, this. Aha, he said. Sadasi, in the midst of the assembly. Amarshi, intolerant. Samshravayan, addressing. Bhagavate, the Supreme Lord. Parushani, harsh words. Abhitaha, having no fear. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The intolerant son of Dhamaghosh became infuriated upon hearing the glorification of Lord Krishna's transcendental qualities. He stood up from his seat and, angrily waving his arms, fearlessly spoke to the entire assembly the following harsh words against the Supreme Lord. Purport. Srila Prabhupada writes, in that meeting, King Shishupal was also present. He was an avowed enemy of Krishna for many reasons, especially because Krishna's having stolen Rukmini from the marriage ceremony. Therefore, he could not tolerate such honor to Krishna and glorification of his qualities. Instead of being happy to hear the glories of the Lord, he became very angry. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti mentions that the reason Shishupal did not object when Sahadev proposed Krishna for the Agra Puja is that Shishupal wanted to ruin King Yudhishthir's sacrifice. If Shishupal had argued earlier against Lord Krishna's receiving the first worship and another person had been selected, the sacrifice would have then proceeded normally. Therefore, Shishupal allowed Krishna to be selected, waited until the worship was over, and then spoke up, hoping in this way to demonstrate that the sacrifice was now spoiled. Thus, he would ruin the endeavor of Maharaj Yudhishthira. In this regard, the Acharya quotes the following Smriti reference: Apujayacha punjyate punjyanam cha vyaktira maha. In the place where those who are not to be worshipped are worshipped, there is offense to those who are actually worshipable. There is also the following statement: Pratibadnathi hi shreya puja bhakti karmaha. In properly understanding who is to be worshipped and who is not to be worshipped will impede one's progress in life. So this verse is a little bit of a cliffhanger. So I'll have to show up for tomorrow's class to find out what Shishupal has to say. But what we can infer is that he's getting ready to say some criticism about Krishna. And this isn't something totally uncommon. Those that are engaged in meeting people outside and discussing philosophy with them eventually will encounter somebody who is in some way, shape, or form inimical towards Krishna, and they have so many things to say about Krishna that aren't very pleasant. This has happened several times to myself. I'll meet somebody from South Asia who's somewhat familiar with Krishna but is of a different religious persuasion, and they'll say, "Oh, Krishna can't be God because he's immoral. He dances with other people's wives. He steals women. He does this. He does that." So it's not an uncommon thing. And actually, one time somebody brought this up to Srila Prabhupada in a argumentative type of mood, and Srila Prabhupada had a pretty simple response. The person that brought this up was married, and Srila Prabhupada corrected him and said, "Actually, everything belongs to Krishna. That means your wife belongs to Krishna. So actually, you are the one stealing Krishna's wife away from him." So this is, as I said, it's not a terribly uncommon thing for people to have something negative to say about Krishna. There's people that can find negative things to say about anything. So, Shishupal is what one could call inimical, and that's one of the reasons why he's wanting to speak ill of Krishna. And not only is he trying to speak ill of Krishna, but he's trying to spoil Yudhishthira's entire sacrifice, which is the envy of, or the nature of an envious person. There's this, what they call it, sour grapes philosophy, where the story goes that a fox is trying to reach some grapes. Somebody's trying to reach some grapes, and they can't quite reach the grapes. And they say, "Ah, they were sour grapes anyway. I didn't really want them." So this inimical attitude is one hurdle that many people have to overcome in life if they hope to have a spiritual life, particularly if one is inimical towards Krishna, towards Krishna's devotees, towards the worship of Krishna. Anybody who's holding these feelings is certainly spiritually dead inside. And as Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out in the commentary, that the Smriti Shastras also give another problem to overcome, that improperly understanding who is to be worshipped and who is not to be worshipped will impede one's progress in life. This is a very common phenomenon in this day and age, that so many people get stuck into a sectarian mindset, or they have this I'm right, you're wrong mentality. Whatever it is, it's not helpful. So this is very easily observed within the Abrahamic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These three originally stem from the same place. They, for a large part, have the same history, particularly between Christianity and Judaism. They use partially the same exact book, but there are different deviations that separate those three. So they all do, to a certain point, agree in the validity of the Bible, the Torah, as a historical record, and then maybe 2/3 of the way through, I think, that's when the deviations start to happen. And the disagreements begin. Within each of these three religions, there's also so many divisions. Each of the prominent divisions, each of the three has two, three divisions of themselves, and each of those prominent divisions has practically innumerable more minute divisions, and even those minute divisions have small divisions within themselves that range from everything to very major philosophical points to very minor details that are relatively unimportant. And even the smallest things, we have a tendency in this day and age to make the smallest things very polarizing. And beyond the Abrahamic traditions, there are so many other religious systems with so many other different varieties. Jains, Sikhs, Aboriginals, pagans, Hindus, Shivites, Shaktas, Vaishnavas, Mayavadis, Tattvavadis, Dvaitavadis. List goes on and on and on and on. All of the different religious systems that are present today. And then there's even worse, one could say there are the people who claim that they're not even religious at all, that they're just spiritual, and they just hodgepodge, mix and match whatever they feel like from one thing or another, regardless of knowing anything about where they're deriving their ideas or practices from. And each one of these groups usually assumes that they have the correct answer, that they have a monopoly on God. There have been so many wars. Even recently, there's wars being fought over the most minute disagreement, the smallest detail in philosophy. There's so many people that claim to be right, and in doing so, try to invalidate others or say that others are wrong. So many misunderstand who is to be worshipped, and they suffer many impediments in life. Just minor disagreements can cause so much confusion. So the question can be raised, what makes us any different than all of the other countless people? And who is actually right? Is there a monopoly on truth? And if there are so many different beliefs, then who is actually right? And how can you prove who is right and who is wrong and who is in between? These questions are becoming more and more common as time progresses as well. As more and more divisions happen, more and more new ideas pop up. People in general become more and more confused as to who could possibly be right. And along with that, more and more people are foolishly and baselessly claiming that not only so many people claim to have a monopoly on God, but there's so many people who also claim to be God himself. I recently saw this video on social media. It's a medium-sized room with a couch. There's this Indian boy, teenager, just surrounded by all of these Western people. They're all looking at him with wide eyes and adoration. Some people are rubbing his feet or petting his hair, massaging his arms. And meanwhile, the boy is laying on the couch, struggling like anything to open a Kinder Egg. And all of these people that are surrounding him and looking at him with awe think that he's a reincarnation of Satya Sai Baba. There are other people who don't necessarily believe that this child is Sai Baba, but they believe that Sai Baba is God. There are others that think that Swaminarayan is God. People think that the sun is God, or that nature, the universe is God. Others say that God is an old man with a big beard. Some say that God is Shiva or Brahma, Vishnu, Kali. Some think that there's no one singular supreme, but there's a pantheon, that God is many. There are so many people who think that they know God, and there are so many people who think that they are God, and there are so many people who think that there is no God. So there's, on the broad spectrum of beliefs about who is God, there's so many options, so many camps that are seemingly in opposition. There's, for the armchair spiritualist, it can seem like there's no real way of knowing which is correct. This is a big problem that's faced today among the people in general. Nobody's entirely sure who's to be worshipped or how they are to be worshipped. So many people have some idea, so many people have the wrong idea, and lots of people also have the right idea. Very few of those people who even have the right idea, any of those people that have any idea, frankly, rarely have any method to back up their claim. Usually it's something superfluous, like, oh, well, I just think this is what it is, or, this book says so, and this book is right because this is the book that my parents told me to read, or it feels right, or it just doesn't feel right. Some people say, I can't see that God exists. Nobody can show him to me, so he must not exist. Others say, oh, well, I think God exists because how else would we be alive? So obviously nature is God because that's how we're all alive. But to know who is worshipable, you have to have some sort of proof You have to have reasoning as to who is worshipable and why. Many times, atheistic, scientist type of people, materialistic type of people, will try to shift the burden of proof. They so many times say that seeing is believing, or you have to prove God exists, because without proof that God exists, then by default that means that God doesn't exist, because he's never made his presence known, at least to these people. They're not willing to accept, which to some degree isn't so bad. Blindly rejecting God, as far as I can tell, is about as bad as blindly accepting God. Either way, there's no real sum and substance to the belief. But actually, there is evidence there for the existence of God. There's so much evidence. But usually these people aren't so interested in the actual evidence as much as they are in remaining right. That's what I've found, that the material world usually revolves around, is looking right, or appearing to be right. Doesn't have any actual, there's no necessity to be right. You just have to give the appearance that you are right, and everything will be okay. So when we're discussing with these scholars, as devotees, we have the great fortune of having Srimad Bhagavatam, which not only gives the science of God, but gives the science of the material world. You can use one to substantiate the other. There's so many portions of the Bhagavatam that are purely scientific and give information that is still trying to be figured out by materialistic scientists. So if you build credibility with one particular aspect of the Bhagavatam, then it's easier to accept the statements in other parts, because there's a little bit of faith that's been developed. Similarly, those who claim oneness, sameness, and self-divinity, they're pretty easy to defeat with their own logic. Srila Prabhupada pointed out the essence of their philosophy, justified vegetarianism, and defeated their philosophy, all with one short little analogy. He described that their justification for meat eating is that when you eat meat, it's simply one Narayan going into the belly of another Narayan. But when a tiger tries to eat you, that's not okay. It's not okay for Tiger Narayan to consume man Narayan. There are other groups who consider regular people to be God, not themselves, but some other person. And these people might have some mystic power that's, to the casual observer, pretty impressive. But even particularly strong mystic powers aren't an indication of divinity. We've seen that powerful yogis like Sai and Falgu Baba, they've also, they had some mystic potency, but they ultimately had to succumb to death, nor could they stop the death of others. So these people, they might have some nice material trickery. They can conjure up some gold or do this or that or the other, but they're not able to stop death, even for themselves. So this is a clear indication that they're not God. And there's other people who claim that God has many forms, and whatever form you like is correct. And we know that while God does have many forms, that not all forms are the divine, that there's no whimsy to the different forms of the Supreme. Even these Abrahamic religions, they all have the same conception, more or less, of God. But even though they have the same foundation of knowledge, they still manage to fight and argue with each other and claim that the other is misconstruing who God is, or they don't know because this is wrong, or they're reading the wrong part of the book, or they accept this or that or the other. So many arguments against other parties. And each of those groups, they believe they have the sole path for union with the divine, and there's no actual basis for any of their claims of rightness over another. They don't have any particular way to establish that they're correct and everyone else is wrong. And in a similar way, those who call themselves Hindus or those who are Shivites, Vaishnavas, and Shaktas also argue pretty endlessly over who amongst them is right. Some even take a polytheistic stance and say that each path is correct because there are many gods, or God has many forms, so we worship one form, you worship another form, and that's all right. And for ourselves, we know that God does have many forms, but we also know that there's one form that stands supreme to all other forms. And though there are many forms of God, there's also many, many more forms that are not God. Any intelligent person should actually know the difference. This is one aspect of knowing who's to be worshipped and who's not to be worshipped. Knowing who's to be worshipped starts with knowledge of the Supreme. So many people today worship any number of nonsense things or persons, artists, musicians, athletes, politicians, their romantic partners, businessmen, all kinds of mundane people are put on a pedestal and worshipped in one form or another. And more in this modern day and age, we're seeing cults form not just around religion, but around mundane personalities, not even necessarily claiming that this person is God, but offering them worship like their when we put our faith in another person, we're bound to struggle in life, because everybody, regardless of how famous or talented or handsome this person might be, they are subject to so many faults and so many imperfections. And when we put our faith in any given person for any reason, we'll only ever become disappointed in life, and ultimately we'll end up failing the test of life. Every 2 years in this country, to a smaller extent, largely every 4 years, we see the same cycle of people putting a very large amount of faith in one politician or another. And I'm noticing more and more now that people are not putting their faith in one politician, but putting their faith in the opposition of a particular politician, either side, with the idea that how could you vote for that idiot? And that idiot means either of them. It's more and more common to hear people disparaging both sides. And this is, at least in my own opinion, this is just as bad as putting your faith in one person as putting your faith in anyone other than one person. We should ultimately understand that we should understand the reality of this material world. We should understand that ultimately this isn't a place where we're going to find happiness. This isn't a place where things are going to be perfect or hunky-dory or moderately fair for everybody. And we should understand that this isn't the place for us. We're here. We're in the wrong place. This isn't where we're actually meant to be. And once we have this realization, that's one way of opening the door for God realization. So how does one know the Supreme, or how does one know who is the Supreme? This type of knowledge doesn't come by any mental speculation, nor does it come in an ascending manner. Lots of people are enthusiastic to accept the scientific method that one can infer truth by their own understanding and experimentation. But this isn't actually a very suitable way to understand anything. When we apply the scientific method, we have difficulty understanding even mundane science and how the world works. Not 100 years ago were doctors prescribing cigarettes as a medicine. About 100 years ago, cocaine and heroin were used very liberally as medicines. And a little bit before that, bleeding was a very common treatment to just remove as much blood from the body as possible. Different toxic chemicals have been said to be healthy. So many nonsense things have been used as health remedies because of this scientific method. We're a clever bunch, but we're not terribly intelligent. This is mainly because we're trying to figure things out on our own, and we don't have any real basis for what knowledge is anymore. So if we can't figure out these minute things, if we can't figure out that using heroin is going to get you addicted and going to cause a lot of problems, or we can't figure out that uranium is toxic and deadly, then how can we answer the bigger problems of life? We're incapable of finding out the science of God by our own accord, because the science of God is perfect. And by using our senses, by using imperfect instruments, we cannot calculate what is perfect. Just like if you have a scale that's not calibrated, you can't measure the weight of a given object. Similarly, the idea of inferring or feeling or having some subtle knowledge, it's becoming more and more popular. There's charismatic people convincing so many others that they have subtle understanding of science, of whatever. And it's nothing more than an exercise of one's imagination. It's pure fiction. So that leaves one method of understanding, the method of descending knowledge, or learning from somebody who actually knows. We wouldn't want to go to a surgeon who has only read books about surgery, or says, well, my dad's a surgeon, so I guess that means I can do surgery too. Or they say, I know intuitively how to do surgery because I'm empathic, so I can sense what's wrong and what needs to be removed. Usually a surgeon who hasn't studied surgery from another surgeon is nothing more than an elaborate executioner. But practically anybody would be comfortable going to a surgeon who went to medical school and have increasing confidence if that surgeon has experience and if they were trained by another notable surgeon, or if they went to a recognized school or they work for a prestigious hospital. So this is the value of having disciplic succession. This is the value of descending knowledge. And this is the value of learning from someone who is self-realized, who knows what the truth is. There's so many different ways to understand the truth. There's so many different revelations of the truth. And we just have to take advantage of somebody who is knows what the truth is. Hear from them. And then we can also know what the truth is. This process, however, does put a burden on the recipient, that once we receive some information, practically speaking, we have a debt to the person who has shared it with us. So within our movement, our debt is that we not just take this information, but that we also try somehow to share it with others. There are so many people in the world that spend countless hours of their lives and countless dollars of money trying to invest in knowledge that isn't absolute. So, as devotees, if we actually believe that what is being passed down to us is the truth, then we have a burden, we have a duty to share that with others. There's so many people that are suffering now, and it wouldn't be right to just think, oh, well, I know, and I'm good, so I don't have to worry about anything or anyone else. The symptom of somebody who is God realized is that they are Jiva Doya, that they're very compassionate. And that compassion means that they want to share it with other people. In this particular age, that is the way that we worship the supreme worshipable. This isn't the bhajan and andi movement. This is the Sankirtan movement, and that means that it's meant to be spread, and it's done by being spread. It's actually the unique feature of bhakti, is that the more we give away, the more that we try to share, the more that we try to spread, the more that we receive for ourselves. There's no way that's more successful in this age in the matter of cultivating devotion in one's own heart than by trying to share it with others. So this is our method of worship in this age. So with that, if there are any questions or comments,
thank you, Prabhu, for the class. A lot of information. Thank you. I was thinking, you saying, I was thinking about, why Krishna expands himself in so many different forms. And I was relating that to what you were saying about how different religions, different people in different religions are debating, about who God is. So these religions are, I think Krishna expands himself to teach us different people on different levels. Now, that's my thought. That's what I get from him. Expand all the different expansions he comes to teach us about him on different levels. Like people, that's Muslims, Christians, they're debating with each other, but Krishna is right there trying to teach them about him, but they're missing it. They're kind of missing it. But could you expand on why Krishna expands himself in this way. That was my idea about it. Could you expand on it a little bit?
The off-topic reason why Krishna has so many different expansions is for different rasas of enjoyment. So that's another aspect of why Krishna expands himself. But to the point is, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, whenever there's a decline in religious principles, I myself come millennia after millennia to reestablish those religious principles. And it's not just that Krishna comes himself, it's not just that Krishna comes as himself or as an expansion of himself, but he also sends his representatives according to time, place, and circumstance. Whatever's clever, as the phrase goes, right? So what works for one period of time with one group of people isn't necessarily going to resonate with another. And similarly, there are different societies within this world, and each society is different levels of degraded. So a more degraded society isn't necessarily prepared for pure Krishna consciousness. They have to be picked up from a lower level and purified and refined, so that eventually they can be prepared to get the straight truth. Others are ready. So the ever merciful nature of Krishna is that he gives so many different ways to understand him. And particularly in this age, it's very simple. The method for understanding is very simple. Even though some people aren't ready for this, very simple method of chanting, so he sends some representatives to try to help prepare those people. The problem with those groups is people don't listen. Even, since the inauguration of the Sankirtan movement, there are so many different people who don't properly listen to what Mahaprabhu said. They don't properly understand the philosophy. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has identified 13 Upasampradayas that have false teachings. They claim to be the same, but they have some fault in their teachings. So if this is happening in the Krishna consciousness movement, certainly it's happening in other systems that are originally authorized, but due to these deviations, become unauthorized. There's so many reasons why people get distracted from what is the truth. But the truth is still there. Certainly not all Christians are wrong. Not all Muslims are wrong. Not all Jews are wrong. And so on and so forth. But it's a step in the refinement process. And it is a stage of purification that they might not have the highest truth in full in their teachings, but it's pointing them in the right direction. At least that's my understanding, my conceptualization is that they're being pointed in the right direction, just like the Buddha avatar comes and outwardly rejects the Vedas, meanwhile teaching Vedic principles, because people have misconstrued things. At that time of the manifestation of the Buddha avatar, so many people were using the Vedas as a means for conducting animal sacrifice for their own pleasure. So Buddha came and said, forget all of that and do XYZ. The joke's on them though, because XYZ was the actual Vedic principles. So it's not necessarily the end all be all, but it's getting people back on track. And particularly in this age, we're so far off track. Lots of guidance and redirection is needed.
Thank you, Prabhu.
I was just thinking about, you had spent a little bit of time discussing how persons, I guess, take to a religious system or don't take to one or invent one. And those in the category of inventing, you were saying that, using inferences, etc., wouldn't necessarily lead them to, create a religious system. So, and of course, later on coming to the point where, looking at a particular body of knowledge that is, coming in a disciplic succession directly from Krishna, one would have to say that the usage of the rational process is actually helpful in understanding that particular body of knowledge. One has to apply, rational thought process to comprehend a body of knowledge. So I was just thinking about, making that distinction where the rational process is used in a positive way.
Right. Time management wasn't on my side today. The point that I had to move past very quickly for the sake of time was that rational knowledge is like a knife. Depending on who is using the knife and how they're using the knife, determines if it's good or bad. So knife in the hands of a thief is bad. Knife in the hands of a surgeon is good. So when we're using our rational knowledge to concoct or misconstrue or invent our own system, it's not very good. But when we apply our rational knowledge to something that is authorized or to the truth, then we actually find that it's very beneficial. And actually, we're encouraged to apply our rational thought in this process, and we're discouraged to accept blindly. So it's a dichotomy that one way is very dangerous or harmful, and the other way is very beneficial. Like I said, I had to kind of rush past that so that we could end at a reasonable time. Anything else? Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.